To keep up with the trend of crazy news weeks for Magic, Wizards of the Coast has officially taken over the Commander format. We're going to go ahead and break down some of the facts today. So I should start that in yesterday's episode of our podcast, we were talking about the recent bans from last week for Commander. And we had a section where we talked about the inevitability of this happening. The podcast ended up coming out a couple days after this news was announced, but I was scared that this was going to happen because this is something people were calling for. People wanted Wizards of the Coast to take over the Commander format. I'll get into why I didn't want that. I mean, really, you could just go check out the podcast episode. I feel like I was pretty descript there. And then if you want Jason and I's opinions on the bans, you can hear that there. All that to say is it ended up happening. A couple days after we recorded that podcast, a couple days before it came out, it happened. Wizards of the Coast is officially taking over the rules committee for Commander. So here is the article that actually came out on Monday. This is on the future of Commander. And they open up with just saying, hey, it was really messed up that there were threats and stuff towards members of the RC and the CAG. And then it comes up with, so today in partnership with members of the existing Rules Committee, we are announcing that the Rules Committee is giving management of the Commander format to the game design team of Wizards of the Coast. And there was some speculatory stuff, like was this like a forced takeover of Wizards because they didn't like the bans or whatever. But a lot of it came down to that they're doing this in part to protect the members of the Rules Committee because of the threats that they were getting online. And if you fact check around on Twitter, a lot of the members of the RC are confirming this. The official Rules Committee Twitter put out a statement saying that, yes, we agree with this. This isn't like a hostile takeover. We are willingly giving this up. Because something that when this article first launched was that people were concerned about was like, oh no, are we going to have two Commander formats now because they didn't agree to this or whatever? So that's not happening. This is like a willing handing over of power. Notably, it also says that Commander has always been a community-focused format, and this move in management does not change that. And then it also goes on to say that some of the existing members of the Rules Committee will still be somewhat involved, even though Wizards has taken the reins on design and management of the format. And then in this what's next section, they mostly are talking about like checking out the ban list, maybe possibly making some changes to it, but probably most notably is that they talk about making Rule 0 easier. They are going to create a numbering system bracket for power level. So here is a screenshot of specifically the cards that they used. For example, they put high power, number 4, and then we have 3, 2, low power, 1. 1 being like the staple cards that like you don't need to mention at all. The Swords to Plowshare, the big dumb creatures. They also mentioned that Soul Ring's going to be in this category because they can't touch Soul Ring. Soul Ring is immune to any kind of criticism apparently. And then as you move up, things get like more, if you're playing these cards, you're probably playing at a higher power level. And then on the official Magic Twitch, they did have a breakdown of more details about who's going to be taking the reins on this and trying to reassure the community that like it's all going to be fine. Like we're not going to drastically change the format overnight. We're still going to have it a community focused thing and all that. All right. So to start off with, I am happy that this takeover was not hostile. I am happy that the Rules Committee agreed to it and that Wizards wasn't just being like, all right, we're taking it now. This is ours. And to be fair, from a financial standpoint, it is kind of weird that this group of volunteers was running Magic's biggest format. Now, granted, it wasn't always Magic's biggest format, but the idea that there are people who don't work for Wizards of the Coast who are running their now most popular format is kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy that this didn't happen sooner, just from a financial standpoint, because it is in Wizards' best interest to have complete control over Commander. In the podcast yesterday, the example I used was Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith. This attempt on my life has left me scarred, and now we are going to turn the Republic into the first galactic empire, and everyone's clapping because, you know, there's the violence. Then Padme's talking about like, this is how liberty dies under thunderous applause. That was the example I used. And there are real world implications of this too. And that's a lot of what this feels like. Like, yes, it's good for Wizards to say, hey, it's really messed up that there were death threats. You are better protected if this is stuff that's coming from internal Wizards of the Coast. So we're going to take over that and get the heat off of you guys because we can better protect ourselves. We can better take the heat. I do actually genuinely think that there is some goodwill here from Wizards. I do genuinely think that they care about the safety of members of the community. However, it is also in their financial benefit to do this. The best example of that is Jeweled Lotus, because that is a card that they made with the intention of being a pushed chase card. They previewed it to the RC, and even the RC was like, please don't make this card. This is a mistake. This is unhealthy for the format. Wizards of the Coast made it anyways, and then they used it to push and sell packs in Commander Masters and in Commander Legends when it originally came out. And I felt pretty happy with the banning of that card. I feel like that card is problematic. I think it's, in theory, there are fair things you can do with it, but in reality, it's just used to make good commanders even better, and that's just not healthy for the format. I'm just kind of anti-fast mana, period. I think Sol Ring should be banned, but that's neither here nor there. And so when the RC banned Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt, it was like a signal to Wizards that they shouldn't make these kind of cards, and it also is keeping Wizards of the Coast accountable. Now Wizards has to think twice about whether or not they are going to make these pushed cards to help sell packs. So having that outside force was actually really helpful. But now that all of this stuff is going to be done internally at Wizards of the Coast, yes, there are plenty of people who are designing for Commander at Wizards of the Coast who genuinely care about the format and want to make it a fun, healthy experience. And in part, they have to, right? Because if the game becomes unfun, enough people aren't going to play anymore, and that's going to keep them from making money, and the game will cease to exist. So to a certain extent, they have to make the game fun and healthy. But now there's no accountability, and now they really can just, the shareholders can overshadow what other people think might be best for the game in order to make more money. So ultimately, that's probably my biggest concern, is that there's no more accountability from Wizards, because I strongly believe that Commander was better and more fun before they put all of their efforts into designing specifically for Commander, because now there's a lot of broken, ridiculous stuff. But to get into this power ranking system, in theory, I agree with it, because I've said for a while that the 1 to 10 power scale that people use to try to describe where their deck is flawed. It's a flawed system because that's too many numbers, and everyone thinks their deck is average, so everyone says their deck is a power level 7, and that's not true. I've said for a couple of years, I've said it on our podcast, that 4 is the number you should use. Your 1 is your like pure jank, like pre-con level or maybe even worse. Your level 2 is your slightly upgraded pre-con. Probably that's actually like real average. Your 3 is your like pretty optimized deck. And then your 4 is your actual CEDH going crazy, pedal to the metal kind of deck. So I've said for a couple years now that there should be 4 and not 10. So in theory, I agree with this system. However, it's very, very difficult to assign these numbers to specific cards. More confusing, they have this example here with Ancient Tomb that if you have a card that is a 4, quote unquote, like Ancient Tomb, that you could say, but my deck is not a 4, it's actually a 2. If I take out the Ancient Tomb, is that okay? I don't see how this makes Rule 0 any easier. I actually think that Rule 0 is kind of ridiculous, because unless it's a group that you regularly play with, it's just, you're always going to have a mismatch. You're playing CEDH or you're playing casual, you're playing pre-con-ish power level or more optimized, and that should be the extent of it. This, my deck is a 4, but if I took this card out, it would actually be a 2. That's just overly complicated. And even then, like, there's going to be disagreement with even just the few examples they used here. So here's the graph, right? If we said that like Armageddon is high power, yeah, I guess that's true based on like a saltiness scale, like people just don't like to see it. But like Draenith Magistrate, why is that a 3? People hate that card. I would agree that it's not as bad as Armageddon, but like there are people who are going to say that should be a 4. Swords to Plowshare and then Big Dumb Creatures, I would agree that's a 1, but then they've also said that Sol Ring is going to be in the 1 category, and that doesn't check out to me. That's a much stronger card than a lot of these other cards. And then Vampiric Tutor, like the logic of putting that as a 4 is that, well, it's a very pushed card, it's very strong, it's going to find you any card in your deck, so if you're trying to do some kind of combo, that's, very, very strong. And I would agree with that sentiment, but then there are people who are playing tutors, quote unquote, fairly. They're like, hey, I need to find some card draw. I'm going to get some card draw. Or, hey, it's time for a board wipe. I'm going to go get a board wipe. They're not assembling combos. They're just using it as an extra copy of their whatever card they're needing from their 99. And you could argue that the consistency by itself could mark it higher up on the list, but I don't think that's fair to say it's a 4. So intent of use matters, and this numbering scale can't do that. The one thing that kind of gives me hope is that one of the people who's going to be pushing for this and implementing all the changes is Gavin Verhey. If you are not checking out Gavin's YouTube channel, Good Morning Magic, this is a great YouTube channel. He gives very, very good insights on how Magic is made. That stuff is very interesting. But then he also just has like other cool stuff, like hints about the upcoming sets, and he gives like guides to like draft and pre-release and stuff like that. So it's very informative, but especially interesting from the stuff that's like behind the scenes, how cards are made and stuff like that. I really like it. He's semi-active, posts, once every other week or something like that. The real kicker here is that he has taken the lead in putting together a group of people to organize Pauper, which is the format where only commons are legal. And he does videos for like here, where they do updates and stuff for any ban changes, or if there's not changes, why there aren't changes, stuff like that. It's very, very helpful and does a great job communicating. And honestly, Pauper has always been kind of a cool format, but ever since he has put this group together to help better regulate the format, it's gotten even better. And Gavin is one of those people who just genuinely loves the game. He genuinely wants what's best. And yes, he works for Wizards of the Coast. Yes, he wants to make the company money, but he really just wants to make a really fun experience based around a game he genuinely loves. Keep in mind, this is the kind of the guy who created Modern too, which until pretty recently was my favorite format. So this is a guy who genuinely cares. I think it'll be easier to say how this is going to go once the official lineup is decided for who all is in that group that's helping organize Commander and run things. But having Gavin in already increases the odds that it's going to work out okay. And then also the article does say that they're looking at the ban list. They're not making any changes, but there's a chance of changes of that in the future. But they're hoping that the bracket system helps enough that Rule 0 becomes easy enough that they're not going to need to make as many changes. So all this to say that this is a big deal. This has been probably the craziest 2 weeks in Magic in a long time, especially for Commander, which is the biggest format. So it's big deal. I would say I'm optimistic because, like I said, Gavin really cares about the game. There's a good chance that Wizards is able to do a great job regulating this game because instead of now having a couple volunteers running their biggest format, now they actually have Wizards of the Coast employees who are theoretically some of the best game designers in the world. That seems like a good trade-off. That seems like something that could actually work out for the betterment of the format. However, like I said, Wizards of the Coast at the end of the day has to make money. And there is an opposition sometimes to making money and making the game healthier. Jeweled Lotus again, as an example. So this is something I was really hoping wasn't going to happen, but it's happened, and it's going to be a matter of time before we really see the effects of it. It's hard to say right now whether it's going to be a good change or a bad change. And realistically, it's actually probably going to be a bit of both. There's probably going to be certain things at certain times where things are going to seem really bad, and then also times where it's going to seem really good. I think it is going to be a give and take. I really do hope that they do bring in old RC members because I actually do think that they, for the most part, did a good job. I wish they had moved quicker on these bans. I think that would have helped decrease the pushback and the crazy outrage that we got from the bans. But overall, I actually think that they did a decent job and tackled important things and did a decent job at communicating. So I do hope that they bring in some of those people. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. This is obviously really big news. Do you think this will be better or worse for the game? Or do you agree that we probably just need to wait and see what it all means in practice? Again, check out our last video, our podcast where we talked about the bans if you want Jason and I's input on that. And we will see you guys later. Bye.